I didn't remember the kiss. Not really, just the echo of it. The way it felt too soft, too sudden. And the way he looked at me after when I whispered his sister's name like it might rewind time. It didn't. The sun was already pressing through the blinds, thin and pale like it hadn't made up its mind about the day. The apartment smelled like old wine and garlic noodles. I sat up slowly, blanket tangled around my knees, and scanned the living room. My mouth was dry. My head was quiet, not hungover, just hollow. And there it was. A gray hoodie. Folded sloppily over the back of the chair like someone meant to grab it but changed their mind. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Derek's either. I walked over and lifted it with 2 fingers. It was still warm. I held it close just for a second and breathed in. Cedar, a hint of laundry powder. Him. Then I folded it tighter and stuffed it under the couch cushion. The cushions still held the weight of us. I didn't want to sit there. I padded into the kitchen. Half a bottle of Pinot was still on the counter. A cracked mug had lipstick smudged on the rim. Tessa's favorite mug. Tessa. I felt it in my stomach. The name, the weight of it. Her laugh, her trust. "I trust you," she said once after a night out where she drank too much and I made sure she got home. "If anything ever happens with Eli, I'll kill you, but only after I forgive you." We laughed so hard we cried. We were 20 then. Stupid safe. I opened the fridge, closed it again. No food, no appetite. I pressed play on my phone. A voicemail from Derek blinked at me. 3:02 a.m. Cass. I know you said we shouldn't talk. But I keep thinking about last summer. About the cabin. About the dog park. I don't know. Maybe none of it mattered to you. Maybe it did. You don't have to call me back. I just needed to say it out loud. I let it finish. Then deleted it. A knock on the door made me jump. I froze. My hair was still a mess. I hadn't washed my face. My hoodie, the one I actually owned, was inside out. I opened the door slowly. Eli stood there holding 2 paper cups of coffee like they weren't burning his hands. He smiled like this was normal. Like this was Sunday morning and we were in the habit of sharing them. "I figured you didn't want to do small talk over text," he said. He looked good. Worse, comfortable. I stared at him. "You slept with me," I said quietly. "I noticed," he said, eyes soft. We stood in silence. Then I stepped aside and he walked in. He set the coffees down on the counter. "One's just black. You used to drink it that way." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "I still do." He watched me careful. "So," he said finally, we pretending this didn't happen. I took a sip of the coffee. It was too hot. It burned my tongue. I welcomed the pain. "Thanks," I said. "I needed caffeine, not commentary." He nodded. "Got it." We sat across from each other at the small round table. There were papers between us, old receipts, a half-finished crossword, a nail polish bottle Tessa left behind. His foot brushed mine. Neither of us moved it. I thought about saying something grown-up. Something final. But the words didn't come. He finished his coffee in 3 gulps. I should go. I didn't stop him. When the door clicked shut, I waited 5 seconds. Then got up, locked it. I walked to the couch. Pulled the hoodie from beneath the cushion. Held it in my lap. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just sat there with the evidence of something I wasn't ready to name. And I realized something strange. I told myself it would be a one-time thing. But I kept the hoodie. "Would you?" He didn't text for 2 days. Not even a meme. Not a "hey you alive" or a comment on my story. Just silence. And yet there I was. Lying in bed on a Tuesday morning, thumb twitching over his Instagram handle, refreshing like I was checking the weather. It was ridiculous. I wasn't 16. I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't anything. Except curious. He'd posted a photo of a park bench. No caption. Just an angle I recognized. The bench outside Norland Library, the one near the bike rack where Tessa once cried after bombing her stats final sophomore year. Was it for me? Did I want it to be? I threw the phone down and rolled over. The hoodie was still draped on the back of my chair. It hadn't moved since Sunday. I hadn't either. Tessa texted just before noon. Tessa, wanna look at grad outfits today? If I have to choose alone, I'll end up in yoga pants and regret. I stared at the screen. Then typed, deleted, typed again. Finally just sent Emmy, sure. 1:30, the usual, she replied with a thumbs up emoji and a sunflower. I sat up and stretched. My body ached not from pain but from holding still too long. In the mirror, I didn't look different. But I felt like I'd shifted. Like something inside me had moved half an inch to the left. Tessa was already waiting at the boutique when I got there. She waved from the fitting room mirror, 2 hangers hooked on her wrist, one blush, one navy. You're late, she said, grinning. Which means I've already ruled out anything sparkly and gold. You're welcome. I smiled. Some of us had coffee first. She rolled her eyes. You and your sacred morning rituals. We drifted into small talk, rental robes, final exams, the fact that Boulder couldn't decide whether it was spring or winter. Then she said it. Casually. Like it didn't matter. Like it was any other sentence. Eli's been weird this week. Quiet. You noticed that I froze with a dress in my hands. I haven't talked to him, I said. Too quickly, too flat. Tessa didn't catch it, or maybe she chose not to. Huh, she muttered, flipping through hangers. Maybe he's finally grown out of his tragic poet phase. I forced a laugh. Doubt it. That boy will be quoting Rilke into his 60s. She snorted. Eli's like a puppy with perfect arms. Don't let him think he's interesting or he'll follow you home. I pretended to laugh again. But something in me twisted. Because that was the joke. That was always the joke. And now it wasn't funny. We picked 3 dresses each and took turns trying them on. Tessa looked radiant in navy, soft and sure. She stepped out, posed dramatically. If I trip crossing the stage, you better fake faint to distract people. Deal, I said. But my mind wasn't in the dressing room anymore. It was already a few blocks away. At a coffee shop I hadn't set foot in since December, wondering if he'd be there. He was already sitting by the window when I walked into Sweet Bean. Same corner booth. Same crooked smile. Like we were regulars. Like this wasn't new and dangerous. Hey, he said, sliding a small cup toward the empty seat. Matcha with mochi. My usual. I raised an eyebrow. Still playing psychic. He shrugged. Call it memory. I sat down without touching the yogurt. The sun outside made patterns on the glass. He looked tired, but not in a bad way, like he'd been thinking more than sleeping. You didn't text, I said. You didn't either. We stared at each other for a beat too long. Then he smiled again, smaller this time. I wasn't sure what to say, he added. I figured if I gave it space, you'd come find me if you wanted to. I hated that he was right. And I hated how much I wanted to stay. He gestured toward the yogurt. You used to come here with my sister. I picked up the spoon. Paused. I'm not her, I said. He didn't flinch. Yeah, I know. We ate in silence for a while, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Just careful. Outside, students passed with headphones and iced coffees. Life moved normally, and here we were paused in the middle of it. After a while I looked up. I don't even know what this is. Neither do I, he said. But it doesn't feel fake, and that more than anything made me stay. We didn't talk much on the walk back. The air had that crisp late March bite, sunny but sharp. I kept my hands in my pockets. Eli didn't try to hold them. I was grateful for that. At the door to my apartment, I hesitated. The key felt heavier than usual in my palm. I turned to him. You don't have to come in, I said. It was an out. A way to rewrite this moment. He looked at me steady. I know. But he didn't leave. So I opened the door. Inside, everything was exactly where I left it. The hoodie still hung over the chair. My laptop blinked softly from the couch. It felt like walking into a room mid-confession. We stood there just breathing. Then he walked over to the chair, ran his fingers along the hoodie's sleeve. "You kept it." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He stepped closer. Close enough that I felt the warmth of him. Not rushed. Not urgent. Just there. He kissed me like it was a question, and I answered without a word. There were no giggles. No clumsy buttons. No whispered sorry after. It wasn't like before blurry reckless. This time it was sharp. Every touch deliberate. Every glance loud in its silence. We ended up on the couch, skin against skin, breath sinking without instruction. After we didn't move for a while, the room dimmed around us. Only the hum of the fridge and the soft tick of my wall clock remained. He traced a circle on my shoulder with one finger. "We can't keep doing this," I said. It came out quieter than I meant. Eli didn't stop. His hand stilled just for a second. Then he said softly, "Then stop me." I didn't. He stayed a while longer. Long enough to sip water from my chipped glass. Long enough to fold the blanket neatly when he stood. But not long enough to say what this was. Not long enough to promise anything. He kissed my forehead before leaving. Not my lips, not my cheek. Just there, like I was someone soft he didn't want to bruise. And then the door closed, and I was alone again. I stayed on the couch, half covered, half watching the ceiling. My phone buzzed once. A notification from Instagram. Derek had commented on an old post, one from last fall. A blurry picture of me laughing in the backseat of his car, leaves in my hair, wind in my mouth. He'd written back then. That was it. No emoji. No punctuation. Just the weight of what wasn't anymore. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the delete button. But I didn't press it. Not yet. Outside, the sun had started to set, casting the room in that golden, too honest kind of light. Everything looked touched by something real. Even the hoodie. Still resting on the chair like it lived here now. I told myself I didn't want more. I told myself this wasn't a pattern. But I also never said no, not once. Not out loud, not in the ways that counted. So what does that make me? The porch light was already on when we pulled up. Tessa hummed along to a playlist I couldn't hear. Her makeup was light, effortless. Her hair pinned half up with a pearl clip. She looked like someone who belonged exactly where she was headed. Me, I wore a red dress. Not because I meant anything by it, it was the only one that fit right, that didn't still smell like Eli. "I'm glad you came," she said, reaching over to squeeze my hand before getting out of the car. "Mom loves seeing you." "You know that, right?" I nodded. My throat was too tight for anything more. The Lynn house smelled like ginger and garlic the second the door opened. Grace Lynn appeared in an apron, wiping her hands on a towel that had tiny cranes embroidered on the hem. "Cassidy," she said, warmly, stepping forward to kiss my cheek. "You look so grown tonight. That red lucky color." I smiled. Tried not to wince. The hallway led to the dining room, and the table was already set. 6 chairs, lacquered chopsticks, porcelain soup spoons resting perfectly in their holders. I took my seat across from Tessa. Eli was next to her, already pouring jasmine tea into delicate cups like it was his job. He looked up once, met my eyes, then looked away. I felt it in my stomach. Small talk bubbled. Grace asked about graduation. One aunt leaned in to ask if I was still interning at the publishing office. I nodded. Gave polished answers. Laughed when it was time to laugh. And the whole time I could feel Eli beside me, breathing, moving, not touching. Every movement he made sounded louder to me than the rest of the room combined. Fake it through one meal, I told myself. You've lied better under worse lighting. But then Grace passed me the kimchi with a smile, like I'd been family for years. Like I belonged. The scallion pancakes were still warm. Someone had taken the time to cut them into even triangles stacked like petals on a ceramic plate. I watched a cousin reach for one with chopsticks so smooth and practiced they never made a sound. Grace poured more tea, her movements graceful and controlled. "I'm glad you chose red," she said to me across the table. "It brings out your calmness." Red is strong but quiet. That's rare in girls these days. I smiled, unsure what to do with that. Tessa beamed. Told you, Mom. She has good taste. Eli's hand hovered over the soy sauce. He hadn't looked up since we sat down. I wanted to scream. Or stand. Or laugh too loudly just to break something open. Instead, I folded my napkin again, neater than it needed to be. Small plates were passed. Dumplings with steam rising off the plates, pickled radish with just enough sweetness to surprise. Each dish a comfort. Each dish a weight. Grace asked Tessa about her final design project. One of the aunts leaned toward me and whispered, "Cass, when are you finally joining us for Lunar New Year?" I answered politely. Said something about maybe next year. My voice felt like someone else's. The truth was, I'd already joined. I just didn't know what seat I was supposed to fill. Eli finally glanced up, brief, sharp, unreadable. I looked away first. Dessert came in small bowls. 3 sesame balls left. Tessa took one. A cousin took another. Only one remained. Without looking up, Eli slid the plate toward me. Quiet. Precise. As I reached, our fingers touched, just the edge of a knuckle. But it felt louder than every word spoken that night. I didn't flinch, and neither did he. But when I looked up, Grace was watching. Tessa leaned back in her chair, swirling the last of her tea. "That sesame ball was meant for me," she teased, nudging Eli with her elbow. "But I guess Cass has seniority." Everyone chuckled politely. I swallowed, the taste of sesame lingering on my tongue. I wanted to say something light, something that matched her tone. But my mouth wouldn't cooperate. "She's basically my sister already," Tessa added, turning toward Grace. "If I disappear, just let her take over. She knows all my passwords." I smiled. Or tried to. The room felt suddenly smaller. Grace gave a gentle laugh. "Cassidy's always been steady. Even when you were both a mess in high school, she kept you balanced." Tessa grinned. "That's why I keep her close." Eli didn't say a word. I focused on the rim of my teacup where a thin crack curved like a smile. This family, this warmth, it wrapped around me with every word. And all I could think was, they don't know, and I'm letting them keep it that way. After dessert, the table slowly cleared. A cousin offered to wash dishes. Grace insisted on packing leftovers for everyone. The mood softened, voices mellow with tea and full bellies. "I'm going to grab something from the car," I said too casually. No one blinked. No one followed. Outside, the air was cool, the streetlight humming faintly above the driveway. I stood by the mailbox, pretending to check my phone. I didn't need to wait long. The door creaked behind me. "Eli." We didn't speak. He stepped beside me. Close enough to feel the warmth between us, not close enough to touch. Then he did. His hand brushed mine, and in the quiet we turned to each other. His mouth found mine, soft, unhurried, familiar. There were no words. Only the kiss. And the sound, sharp and metallic. A camera shutter. Somewhere across the street. But neither of us heard it. The next morning, sunlight filtered through my blinds in narrow, determined stripes. I lay still, watching the shadows shift across the ceiling. Eli hadn't texted, neither had I. My lips still remembered the shape of his. But my chest held a different ache. The kind that comes when you realize the world sees you one way. And you're quietly becoming someone else. My phone buzzed. "Tessa, Mom says next Sunday too. You in?" "She's making galbi." Then a follow-up. "Tessa. Also, your red dress iconic." I stared at the screen. Typed, wouldn't miss it. Then erased it. Then typed it again. And hit send. I got up, walked barefoot to the kitchen. Opened the fridge. Half a tub of yogurt. One bruised pear. I closed it again. The hoodie was still there. Still draped casually like it belonged. And maybe it did. I picked it up. Folded it, then unfolded it. Pressed it to my face like it might help me breathe better. This wasn't just craving anymore. This had shape, rhythm. And rhythm always builds. I thought of Grace, her calm gaze, the way she saw everything without reacting. I thought of Tessa's hand brushing mine as she passed the soy sauce. Her laugh, her words, "You're already like family." I had stepped into something sacred. And now with every unspoken touch, every exchanged glance, I was shifting the floor beneath it. Still, I didn't feel guilt. Not exactly. It was more like walking through a house you know by heart, and noticing a door you never dared open before, and finding yourself already halfway through it. That night, I sat on my balcony with a blanket over my knees and tea going cold beside me. The street below was quiet, porch lights blinking on one by one like soft confessions. I kept thinking about the shutter sound. I hadn't imagined it. But I also hadn't cared. Not then. The kiss wasn't reckless. It wasn't stolen. It was chosen. Like an inhale held too long, finally let out. I'd told myself I could keep this separate. Private. Harmless. But the way Grace looked at me, the warmth in Tessa's voice, none of that was built for secrecy. And the real danger wasn't the kiss. It wasn't that someone might see us. It was that I didn't want to hide it anymore. I didn't want to pretend that my heart didn't skip when his hand brushed mine. Didn't want to lie when someone asked why I smiled at a text that didn't come from Tessa. I'd lived too long pretending desire had to come wrapped in apology. Now it was just here, breathing beside me. Waiting. My phone buzzed once. No name, just a message. Still thinking about you. No punctuation. No promise. Still. It was enough. I didn't reply. But I didn't delete it either. I sat there tracing the rim of my teacup, listening to the night settle, letting the weight of the secret shift inside me like something no longer content to stay folded. Would you keep it secret too? Or would you want the world to know? You chose this. The air smelled like grilled peaches and white wine. Warm, dry, early May. That kind of Boulder evening where people laugh too loudly and tip servers too much because the semester's over and everything feels possible. The rooftop was strung with Edison bulbs swaying a little in the breeze. I arrived 10 minutes late on purpose. Not late enough to miss the first round of drinks, but late enough to scan the group and adjust my smile before stepping in. I spotted her instantly. Tessa, radiant in a soft lilac dress. Her hair in loose waves. Lipstick just bright enough to say she didn't come casually. She looked like celebration. And for a moment I let myself believe maybe she didn't know. That maybe we were still in the version of life where she'd save me a seat and everything underneath would stay buried. She saw me. Didn't wave, didn't look away either. Just a small nod toward the chair beside her. It was already pulled out, a folded napkin draped across the plate. A place set for me. I walked toward it steady. People called my name. Someone handed me a spritzer. Eli was already there across the table, silent. He didn't smile, didn't flinch. I sat down, and the moment I did, I felt it. Like the air had shifted. Like the ground under the table was no longer level. This wasn't my seat anymore. It was a placeholder. A trap made of linen and expectation. And then Tessa reached into her clutch, pulled out her phone and placed it on the table between us. Face up. The screen was bright. It was the photo. The kiss. Me and Eli. Driveway. Framed in dusk. No caption. No question. Just her hand resting gently beside it. And her silence sharp as broken glass. I didn't reach for the phone. Didn't touch the screen. Didn't try to explain. There was nothing blurry about the image. No plausible excuse, no second-hand angle to hide behind. It was us. Full frame. Undeniable. Tessa didn't speak right away. She picked up her water glass, took a sip, set it back down. Her lipstick left a perfect crescent on the rim. "You didn't even ask," she said, finally. Her voice was soft. Clear, like she was reading a recipe out loud. "You didn't ask if it would hurt. If it would break me." I opened my mouth. Then closed it. The sounds around us, the clink of forks, someone laughing too hard at the far end of the table, kept going like nothing was happening. But everything inside this moment had stilled. I wasn't trying to. My throat burned. It was never about hurting you. Tessa nodded slowly, still not looking at me. That's the problem, she said. You forgot I existed. Across the table, Eli stared down at his plate, unmoving, like he already knew how this would end. I looked at Tessa again, really looked. She wasn't angry in the way I feared. She wasn't shouting or shaking. She was disappointed, and somehow that was worse. Remember when I told you family was my spine? She asked quietly. You break it. She paused. You paralyze me. I remembered. Of course I remembered. We'd been sitting on her bedroom floor junior year. After her dad walked out, she'd cried into my sweatshirt. I held her until she slept. And now I was the one who snapped that line of trust. Not with a scream, but with silence. And choosing not to choose her. Tessa folded her napkin once. Then again. Each crease deliberate, like she needed her hands to be busy while her heart worked out the math of betrayal. The table around us still buzzed. Someone asked for more olives. A birthday toast echoed from another corner of the rooftop. But in our circle, our little four-seat corner of memory and rupture, everything had narrowed. Eli shifted slightly, eyes flicking toward Tessa, then away. He didn't speak, didn't move. And then she stood. Not in a dramatic way. No scrape of chair legs, no shattered glass. Just a simple rise. Controlled. Balanced. She looked down at me. Not furious, just tired. I don't hate you, Cass, she said quietly. But I don't know who you are anymore. And somehow that sentence landed harder than if she'd screamed. Because she meant it. Every syllable was honest. And clean. And final. She turned, picked up her clutch, and walked away. Her wine glass sat full. Her plate untouched. The empty chair stayed pulled out beside me, napkins still folded, breeze tugging at the hem of the tablecloth. Eli didn't move. Not yet. He kept his hands in his lap, eyes on the spot where she'd stood. And I wanted to chase her. Wanted to say, wait, please let me explain, though I had no new truth to offer. No better version of what had happened. But I didn't move. The chair beside me stayed empty. And that more than anything made it real. Eli reached for his glass, but didn't drink. His fingers just curled around the stem like he needed to hold something steady. She didn't cry, he said after a while. Still not looking at me. She never does, I replied. Then added, not where people can see. We sat in that silence, two people who had cracked something sacred and were now staring at the pieces, too tired to pick them up. She asked me, he said. Last week. She asked if anything was going on. I turned to him. And you said, he looked at me then. Eyes steady. Nothing. I nodded. It wasn't a betrayal, not worse than mine, just parallel silence. Matching omissions. She's your sister, I said. As if he didn't already know. And you're her best friend. His voice was calm. Too calm. Which makes us both the villains, doesn't it? I didn't answer. Because part of me still wanted to believe we weren't. A server passed by refilling water glasses. She paused, gestured at Tessa's plate. Should I clear this? Eli looked at me. Waited. No, I said quietly. Leave it. The server nodded and moved on. The plate stayed full, the seat stayed empty. And the two of us stayed right where we were. Not quite together. Not quite apart. Eventually the music changed, a new playlist, brighter and louder. Someone clinked a spoon against a glass and made a joke about summer plans. The party continued. Like it always does. But I wasn't in it anymore, I excused myself. Quietly. No one noticed except Eli. His eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. He didn't try to stop me, didn't follow. I left my wine untouched. Napkin folded neatly beside the plate. Just like Tessa's. The elevator ride down was slow. Each floor dinged like a verdict. Not guilty, not innocent, just known. Outside, the air had cooled. A breeze moved through the trees, lifting the hem of my dress. I walked without direction. Let the heels click on sidewalk, cracks past bars and storefronts glowing soft with end-of-day life. My phone stayed silent. And somehow that made sense. Words weren't going to fix what broke. Not this time. Somewhere in my chest something ached, but not in the way I expected. Not sharp. Not sudden. Just the slow settling of knowing that I couldn't go back. That I'd left one version of myself behind at that table. And I wasn't sure who I was walking home as. The night moved around me. Cars passed. Laughter spilled from open patios. And I wondered, if you had been me, if the person you loved was the person you shouldn't touch, would you have stood up and followed her, or would you have done exactly what I did? Stay still and let the chair grow cold. I didn't cry. Not when Tessa blocked my number. Not when I saw our group photo vanish from her Instagram. Not even when Gracelyn's name lit up on my phone screen with a cold silence that said more than any voicemail could. But that night, when the knock came sharp and out of place against the soft hum of rain, I almost did. I didn't move at first. The apartment was dim. Lamplight pooled across my coffee table, catching the edge of an untouched mug, half a sleeve of saltines. Outside, the rain tapped a rhythm on the windows, insistent and intimate. The knock came again. Softer this time. I crossed the room barefoot. Every step felt deliberate, like I already knew who it was and what it might mean. When I opened the door, he was there. Eli, soaked. Hair plastered to his forehead, shirt clinging to his frame. A plastic-wrapped envelope in one hand, nothing else. No umbrella, no words ready. I told Mom, he said. His voice cracked, not with volume but with weight. It wasn't defiant. It wasn't dramatic. Just tired. Honest. I looked at the envelope. Didn't ask what was inside. Didn't ask why now. What did she say? I whispered. He let out a breath. She said to fix it. A pause. So I'm starting here. I stepped aside. No words. Just a quiet motion, enough for him to understand. He walked in, dripping onto the hardwood. I closed the door behind him, sealing out the sound of the street, leaving only the gentle percussion of rain and the small pulsing silence between us. I handed him a towel from the bathroom shelf. He wiped his face, then his arms, then pressed it against the back of his neck like he needed the fabric to anchor him. I went to the kitchen. Boiled water. Didn't ask if he wanted tea, just made it. He sat on the floor by the couch, knees drawn up, arms folded loosely across them. I joined him a few minutes later, 2 mugs in hand. He took his without looking at me. Steam fogged the space between us. For a while, we just sat. No music. No television. No news anchor narrating a world that didn't feel real to us anymore. Just breath. And rain. And the small creaks of an old apartment settling around a new truth. What did you tell her? I asked finally. Eli looked over, eyes softer than I remembered. That I love you, he said. Simple. Like it was a fact, not a plea. My fingers tightened around the ceramic mug. Not because I didn't believe him, but because it felt heavier than the silence we'd been carrying. Grace called, he added. Before I left, she said if I bring you to brunch next weekend, know what that means. I blinked. Mother's Day. He nodded once. Then took a long sip, like the tea might steady him more than anything I could say. I didn't respond right away. Words felt too formal for what was happening. Like they'd make the moment smaller, not clearer. Instead, I leaned back, letting my head rest against the wall. I closed my eyes. Listened to the rain tapping the window. To the water in the kettle clicking as it cooled. To Eli breathing steady, close, real. His hand brushed against mine. Not on purpose, not at first. But I didn't pull away. Neither did he. We sat like that for a long while. Shoulders barely touching. Mugs growing cold in our hands. I don't need a plan, he said eventually. His voice was low, but there was no fear in it. No timeline, no label. I don't want to walk around pretending it didn't mean something. I opened my eyes and turned to look at him. His hair was still damp, curling a little at the edges. His shirt had dried just enough to stop clinging. He looked tired but not lost. And he was looking at me like I mattered. Not as an idea, not as his sister's best friend, but as myself. "You asked me that a year ago," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "Are we still doing this?" I quoted softly. "And I said we shouldn't." "Yeah," he said, a wry smile tugging at one side of his mouth. "But then you didn't stop me." I reached for his hand. This time not by accident, and this time I didn't let go. We didn't speak much after that. The rain softened, turning into a hush like someone had turned the volume down on the whole world. Inside, the lamp's light stretched across the floor, casting our shadows together in a quiet golden outline. Eli leaned back, his shoulder brushing mine again, this time with intention. His hand was still in mine, warm now. Familiar. I thought of all the things we could have said. "I'm sorry. I was scared. I didn't know what it meant. You were never supposed to matter like this." But none of those words would have added anything. Some connections don't need explaining, they just need space to breathe. He took a deep breath and I matched it without meaning to. Like our lungs were synced. Like the quiet between us had become a language of its own. Eventually, he stood. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Just rose slowly, then looked down at me with a softness I hadn't seen since before everything unraveled. "I should go," he said. "You don't have to," I answered almost by reflex. His lips curved, not quite a smile, more like a thank you for the offer. But he nodded. He reached for the envelope he'd left by the door and set it gently on my table instead. "It's not important," he said. "But it's honest." I didn't ask what was inside. Didn't open it. Didn't need to. He leaned forward, pressed a kiss to my forehead. Not a question. Not a promise. Just presence. And then he left. The door clicked softly shut behind him. The apartment felt heavier after he left. Not in a bad way, more like the air had finally settled. Like everything that had been floating in uncertainty was starting to fall into place. I didn't move for a while. Just stared at the envelope on the table. The plastic wrap still fogged from the heat of the room, his fingerprints faint but there. Then my phone buzzed. I picked it up without thinking, expecting a follow-up text from Eli. But it wasn't him, it was Grace. Mother's Day. Noon. "Don't be late, and bring your appetite." No emojis. No punctuation beyond the bare essentials, just her voice crisp even through text. I read the message again. And again. My first instinct was to interpret it as a warning. But something about the last part, "bring your appetite," felt layered, like she knew. Like she'd always known more than she let on. I set the phone down next to the envelope. Stared at them both side by side. 2 invitations. 2 different kinds of truth. Neither asked for permission. Both demanded something of me. The rain outside had thinned into mist. My reflection hovered faintly in the window, tired eyes, messy hair, a quiet steadiness I hadn't noticed before. This wasn't about choosing Eli, it was about choosing myself in the aftermath of what that choice meant. I stood finally. Tossed the towel into the laundry bin. Turned off the kitchen light, and walked toward the bedroom, not to sleep, but to prepare. Because if I was going to walk into that house again, I wasn't walking in as a guest. The driveway was already full when I arrived. 3 cars. 1 bike. A potted fern by the porch I didn't remember seeing last year. The front door was half open, like it had been left that way deliberately. As if they knew I would come. As if they weren't sure whether to make it easy or let me decide for myself. Inside, I heard voices. Laughter in bursts. Tessa's tone measured, not cold. Grace's cadence exact, like always. I stepped in quietly, my heels clicking against the polished floor. Eli appeared from the hallway as if he'd been listening for the sound. He didn't say anything, just took my coat and hung it on the hook. I smoothed my dress. Pale blue linen, long sleeves. Tessa once said it made me look safe. I wasn't sure if that was a compliment anymore. The dining room opened like a scene I'd been rehearsing in my head for weeks. Pastel tablecloth. Matching napkins. Food arranged like a gallery scallion pancakes in a bamboo steamer, soy braised eggs in a ceramic bowl shaped like a lotus, tiny glass pitchers of soy sauce and ginger vinegar. Grace Lynn looked up first. Pearls at her neck, cardigan crisp white. She didn't smile. But she poured my tea first. That was enough. I took the empty seat beside Eli across from Tessa. She didn't flinch, didn't speak. But there were 6 place settings, not 5. The air smelled like toasted sesame and jasmine rice. No one asked me questions, no one mentioned the past. But everything spoke. Grace passed the soy braised eggs in my direction. Not directly, but placed the bowl so I could reach it first. I nodded a thank you. She didn't respond with words, just adjusted the serving spoon so the yolks wouldn't break. Next came the kale salad, lightly dressed in sesame oil and vinegar. A dish I used to request during college breaks. Tessa's favorite too. I wondered if she remembered that. She didn't look up. But she didn't look away either. The clink of utensils, occasional laughter from Eli and one of the cousins, and the scrape of chopsticks on ceramic, those were the only sounds. Brunch was quieter than I remembered. Or maybe it was always like this and I had only just started listening differently. When Eli refilled my tea, his hand lingered an extra second. Tessa noticed. Her gaze flickered, then steadied. Still, she said nothing. And that silence, it wasn't heavy. It was deliberate. Like the kind of silence you give someone not to punish them but to let them earn their way back. I ate slowly, carefully. Everything felt ceremonial down to the napkin I folded and unfolded twice in my lap. No performance, no defense, just presence. I wasn't here to ask for space. I was here to occupy the one they'd already set. Dessert came without announcement. Tessa disappeared into the kitchen just after Grace cleared the last of the dumplings. No one followed. Even Eli stayed seated, fingers lightly tapping the rim of his teacup. I could hear soft motions, plates being lifted, a fridge door shutting, the unmistakable pop of a whipped cream canister. And then the careful steps returning. Tessa carried a rectangular porcelain tray lined with slices of almond cake, each sitting in a pool of citrus glaze. Light. Minimal. Beautiful. She moved around the table with quiet precision. One plate at a time. No rush, no flourish. When she reached me, she paused. There were 6 slices, 6 plates, but only one had a spoon beside it. White porcelain, delicate. Set to the right of mine. I glanced up. Met her eyes. She didn't blink. Didn't smile, but she said softly, "I didn't forget your allergy. The cake's gluten-free." That was all. Then she turned and kept moving. I stared at the spoon. The handle curled slightly like a question mark. No one else seemed to notice it, but it sat there, undeniably mine. Tessa didn't need to say more. That single sentence was the first thread pulled from a tightly wound knot. The last bite lingered longer than it needed to. I scooped the glaze with the porcelain spoon, not because I needed the sweetness, but because I wasn't ready to set it down. When Grace stood, the rest followed. Chairs slid back in unison, plates gathered quietly like clockwork, choreographed over decades. Tessa didn't say goodbye. But she didn't leave the room. As I walked toward the front door, I placed the spoon on the table softly, as if it might shatter. Grace met my gaze then, and for the first time that day she offered something more than civility. Her hand brushed mine as she passed me my coat. Fleeting, but unmistakably kind. Outside, the porch was warm with afternoon sun. No clouds. Just the smell of grass cut fresh that morning. Eli followed a few moments later, hands in his pockets. He didn't speak right away. We stood side by side, listening to the wind skim through the birch trees that lined the street. Did that, he said, finally feel like forgiveness? I thought about it. Thought about the way Tessa's eyes had stayed on the spoon as she placed it. About the exact way she said my allergy, like she'd remembered more than just the flour. I looked at Eli, his face calm, no need to fix or define it. No, I said. It felt like a seat at the table. And that felt like enough. I didn't look back at the house, Not when we reached the car, not when Eli opened the passenger door for me, not even when the engine hummed to life and we eased down the quiet street. Some closures don't need a final glance. Some are sealed not with a goodbye but with a spoon placed gently beside your plate, the white porcelain one. We didn't speak much on the drive. Eli rested one hand on the wheel, the other brushing my knuckles in slow intervals. No music. Just the kind of silence that had nothing left to prove. I looked out the window at front lawns and lilac bushes in full bloom. Sprinklers swept over them in soft arcs, catching the light like glass threads. Kids chalked flowers onto the sidewalk. And somewhere between one street and the next I realized I wasn't holding my breath anymore. We pulled into my complex. Eli walked me to the door but didn't follow. I turned to him and smiled, not out of habit but because I meant it. "Thank you," I said. For what he asked, genuinely unsure. For letting me arrive, on my own terms. He didn't answer right away, but his smile was all warmth. No craving, no tension, just understanding. Inside, I placed the keys on the counter and kicked off my shoes. Then I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and set the spoon on the windowsill. Not as a memory, not as a symbol, just because it was mine. Some stories don't start the right way. But maybe the ending is still ours to write. Would you have let it die, or dared to stay?